I used to think my life ended the day I got the call. You know that kind of call, right? The one that rips the floor out from under you. For me, it was 3 words. It's all gone. And just like that, everything I'd painstakingly built for 15 years vanished into thin air. I remember my breath catching, a physical gasp that felt like my lungs had forgotten how to work. It was a complete, utter wipeout. But here's the thing nobody tells you. The secret they keep hidden until you're deep in the trenches. Sometimes, you have to lose the life you meticulously planned, the one you thought was your destiny, to finally stumble upon the life that's been patiently waiting for you all along. The one that was always meant to be yours. I'm sitting here today, lucky enough to be sharing this space with someone who didn't just tell me that truth, but showed me. We met in the raw, messy aftermath of our own personal earthquakes. 2 complete strangers, united by different, equally devastating disasters, both absolutely convinced we'd never feel whole again, never laugh genuinely, never truly recover. And what did we learn? Sifting through the wreckage, we discovered that the very moment that shatters you into a million pieces can also, paradoxically, be the precise moment that begins to remake you. This isn't about some saccharine, toxic positivity, where you slap a smile on and pretend everything's sunshine and rainbows. And it's certainly not about trying to convince anyone that pain is pretty. No, this is about something far more profound. It's about what truly happens when you finally stop running from the darkness, when you stop fighting it with every fiber of your being, and instead, you quiet down, lean in, and start listening to what that darkness is desperately trying to teach you. Because it is trying to teach you something. Section 1. The separate storms. My storm started on a Tuesday. I remember it with unnerving clarity because I was wearing my lucky blue shirt, the one, the one I wore to every single major presentation, every big pitch, every crucial negotiation. It felt like a uniform of invincibility. My business partner called, his voice tight, barely audible. Our biggest client, the one that accounted for nearly half our revenue, had pulled out. Just like that. By Friday, a mere 3 days later, 80% of our income stream had evaporated. And by the following Tuesday, exactly a week after that fateful call, I was sitting alone in what was once a bustling office, watching through the desolate windows as the repo truck, a symbol of everything I'd feared, slowly, deliberately, hauled away every single piece of equipment I'd mortgaged my house to buy. That lucky blue shirt, it felt like a cruel, twisted lie. I kept clinging to this cinematic fantasy, this desperate hope that there'd be a pivotal moment, a heroic montage, where I'd miraculously save everything. That's how it works in the movies, right? The gritty soundtrack kicks in. I'm working 20-hour days, charm investors with my sheer force of will, pull off the impossible comeback. Instead, I found myself, more often than not, at 2 a.m., hunched over my laptop, bleary-eyed, Googling things like how to declare bankruptcy without losing your mind. The search history from those months? It's a painfully accurate roadmap of pure, unadulterated desperation, business failure depression, lost everything now what? Can you actually die from embarrassment? It was a descent into a very specific kind of hell. But the absolute worst part wasn't even the gut-wrenching loss of money or the crushing debt. It was the brutal, existential identity crisis that followed. For 10 years, my introduction had been a confident, almost arrogant, founder and CEO. When that title, that identity, that entire edifice disappeared, I simply didn't know who I was supposed to be anymore. It was like looking in a funhouse mirror that reflected back a distorted, unrecognizable stranger. My friends, the ones I thought were lifelong, started calling less and less. My partner, the person who knew me better than anyone, looked at me sometimes like I was a complete stranger, someone she didn't quite recognize anymore. I started actively avoiding mirrors because I couldn't bear to see the failures staring back at me, accusingly. My breaking point, the moment I finally shattered, came in the most mundane of places, the grocery store. There I was, meticulously counting coupons, strategizing how to afford the cheapest, generic brand of cereal, a situation my former, more affluent self would have joked about never, ever having to face. The woman ahead of me in line, she was buying organic everything, swiping her card without a second glance, completely oblivious. And in that moment, this surge of pure, primal rage welled up inside me. It scared me, honestly, how intense it was. Not at her, no, but at the ghost of the woman I used to be, the version of me who was so careless, so cavalier with money, so utterly confident. That woman, I thought, probably slept through the night without waking up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, consumed by terror. I just left the cereal on the belt, turned around, walked out of the store, and got into my car. And there, in that sterile, anonymous parking lot, I cried for 20 minutes. Not the pretty, movie-style tears. These were ugly, gasping, snot-running, chest-heaving sobs. It felt like every ounce of suppressed grief, every fear, every humiliation was finally bursting free. And somewhere in that torrent of despair, I finally admitted the terrifying, unvarnished truth. I was absolutely terrified I'd never rebuild. That this was it. That I'd peaked at 32, and the rest of my life would be spent as the cautionary tale, the whispered "what if" at networking events. The one who had it all and lost it. Your storm, my friend, was different, yet fundamentally the same in its capacity to utterly devastate. You told me once that losing your daughter was like having the sun go out. Not just dimmed, you clarified, not just a temporary eclipse, but permanently, irrevocably extinguished. How do you even begin to breathe in a world that is suddenly, permanently, dark? How do you function when the very source of warmth and light has been ripped away? I remember the exact moment you described. You just finished her 4th birthday party. She was wearing that vibrant yellow dress with the butterflies, the one she proudly called her flying dress. She ran to you across the yard, a whirlwind of wild curls and that adorable gap where her front teeth were missing, and she declared, with all the conviction of a 4-year-old, "Mommy, I'm going to fly to the moon now." 20 minutes later, she was gone. An aneurysm. The doctors, in their clinical, detached way, said it was instant, like someone had simply flipped a switch. But what they don't tell you, what no one can prepare you for, is that the world keeps going for everyone else. The ice cream cake was still melting on the picnic table, a grotesque symbol of interrupted joy. Her presents sat unopened, mocking you with their bright paper and forgotten promises. You kept thinking, desperately, that she'd wake up, confused by all the crying, by the sudden, inexplicable silence. She didn't. The first year was pure, raw survival. You learned to breathe again, one shallow, agonizing inhale at a time. You functioned at the most basic, primal level, showering, forcing down food, pretending to sleep, if only to escape the relentless ache for a few hours. Your marriage, once a sanctuary, became a battlefield of grief, each of you grappling with the unimaginable in your own fractured way. Your husband dealt by burying himself in work, logging 18-hour days, perhaps hoping exhaustion would numb the pain. You dealt by sitting in her room, surrounded by her stuffed animals, toys that would never be hugged again, a silent shrine to a life abruptly ended. You were drowning together, yet in separate, isolated oceans of sorrow. People mean well, don't they? They offer platitudes like, "everything happens for a reason," or "she's in a better place now." What they couldn't possibly understand is that those phrases feel like acid on raw, exposed wounds. There is no better place than a mother's arms. There is no reason, no cosmic justification that could ever explain the absence of a 4-year-old. And the worst, the absolute most infuriating comment was, "at least you can have more children." As if children are interchangeable, like replacing a lost sock or a broken toy. As if another child could ever fill the specific, irreplaceable void that your daughter left. You developed this strange, almost magical superstition about time. If you could just manage to stay awake until midnight, you reasoned, you'd somehow prevent tomorrow from coming. Because tomorrow meant another day without her. Another day of the terrifying possibility of forgetting the exact sound of her infectious laugh, the way her hand felt in yours. Another day of crushing guilt for surviving, for simply existing when she no longer could. You kept her toothbrush, her tiny, worn toothbrush, sealed in a Ziploc bag, terrified of losing even her DNA, the last tangible link. Your grief, you realized, had become this monstrous, hungry thing that consumed everything in its path, everything except the vivid, haunting memory of her. It was a constant, gnawing presence. Section 2. The turning points. My turning point came from the most unlikely, the most unexpected source. My bankruptcy attorney, a man who looked perpetually tired, his eyes holding the weary wisdom of someone who'd seen every imaginable human tragedy, asked me a question during our final, somber meeting. He leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm, and said, "What if this isn't the end of your story? What if it's just the plot twist?" I swear, my first visceral reaction was to pick up my coffee cup and hurl it across his pristine, organized office. But something about the way he said it, with such genuine belief, such quiet conviction, made me pause. It wasn't a platitude, it felt like a challenge. He then told me about his own bankruptcy 2 decades ago, how he'd been so utterly ashamed, so utterly broken, that he'd seriously considered driving his car into a tree. How that catastrophic failure, that rock-bottom moment, had ultimately forced him to pivot, to become the very lawyer who now helped others navigate the same brutal waters he'd once barely survived. The most beautiful gardens, he mused, looking out his window at the city skyline. They grow from compost. Your failure? It's fertilizer. Disgusting, stinking, necessary fertilizer. I walked out of his office that day, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was suffocating. I wasn't happy, not by a long shot. I certainly wasn't grateful for the mess I was in, but I was something else entirely. I was curious. A dangerous, flickering ember of curiosity. What if the life I'd lost, the one I'd poured my heart and soul into building, wasn't the one I was actually meant to keep building? What if all this destruction, this utter annihilation, was somehow making space for something entirely new, something I couldn't even begin to imagine yet? That curiosity felt almost traitorous, like I was somehow betraying my former self, the one who had worked so incredibly hard for that life, for that identity. But it also felt like the first truly honest, authentic emotion I'd had in months. I wasn't okay. I wasn't going to be okay for a very, very long time. But maybe, just maybe, I could allow myself to be curious about what okay might look like someday in this new, uncharted territory. It was a tiny, fragile seed of hope. Your turning point, surprisingly, happened at Target. Of all places, you were buying toothpaste, her favorite character kind, the one she never got to finish. This little girl in the next aisle, maybe 3 or 4 years old, was having a full-blown meltdown about the wrong color sippy cup. Her mom, bless her heart, looked utterly exhausted, on the very edge of tears herself. And you found yourself walking over, not with some grand intention to be helpful, but because you suddenly, profoundly understood something. This stranger's worst day, her raw, public moment of overwhelm, was happening right there in the middle of Target, and everyone around her was silently, or not so silently, judging her for it. Just like they judged you for not being able to get over it fast enough, for daring to still grieve. You didn't say anything profound, you told me. No wise words, no grand pronouncements. You just quietly handed her a pack of stickers from your purse, emergency stickers you still carried, out of habit, for tantrums that would never come from your own child again. The woman's face, you said, crumpled in a mixture of surprise and profound relief. You stood there for a few minutes while her daughter, momentarily distracted, happily decorated the shopping cart, both of you pretending this entirely abnormal situation was perfectly normal. Before you walked away, the woman reached out, grabbed your hand, her eyes glistening, and whispered, "Thank you for seeing us." That's when it hit you, like a sudden, blinding flash of insight. Grief, that relentless, all-consuming monster, had unexpectedly given you this strange, almost painful superpower. The ability to see, truly see, the pain that everyone else so easily ignored, or simply didn't want to acknowledge. You couldn't save your daughter. That agonizing truth was etched into your soul. But maybe, just maybe, you could use this broken, aching heart to notice other broken hearts. Not to fix them, because you knew, deeply, that some things simply can't be fixed, not really, but to witness them, to acknowledge them, to silently say, "I see you. I truly see your struggle." In a world that often rushes past suffering as if it's contagious, something to be avoided at all costs. It was a quiet, revolutionary act of connection. Section 3, the climb. The climb back wasn't dramatic. There was no single morning where I woke up suddenly transformed, a phoenix from the ashes. Instead, It was this agonizingly slow, almost insultingly small series of steps. Making my bed, even when every fiber of my being screamed to stay buried under the covers. Answering just one email when the urge to delete everything, to simply vanish, was overwhelming. Saying, "I'm really struggling today," instead of the automatic, performative, "I'm fine," when friends tentatively asked. Each tiny act felt like a monumental effort, a defiance against the gravitational pull of despair. I started measuring progress in ridiculously small units, the kind that would make my former, achievement-driven self scoff. Day 3, I took a shower without crying, a small miracle. Day 7, I actually cooked a real meal, instead of eating cereal straight from the box for dinner. Day 12, I laughed at something, a genuine, spontaneous laugh, without immediately being consumed by a wave of guilt. My journal from that time reads like a toddler's achievement list, filled with these seemingly insignificant victories. But to me, each of those tiny wins felt like scaling Everest. They were proof I was still moving, however slowly, however painfully. The biggest, most profound shift came when I finally stopped trying to rebuild exactly what I'd lost. I stopped clinging to the blueprint of my old life. Instead, I started asking a different, far more liberating question. What needs to exist now that didn't before? I realized I'd been trying to recreate a life that had already, unequivocally, ended. It was like trying to plant the same garden after a devastating wildfire. The soil was different. The climate had changed. I needed entirely new seeds, an entirely new vision for growth. So I started small. I offered to help a local nonprofit with their social media. Basic stuff, things I could do in my pajamas between panic attacks, things that required minimal emotional investment. They, in turn, introduced me to other failed entrepreneurs, people who had also hit rock bottom. We formed this strange, motley support group of individuals rebuilding from scratch. There was no networking, no forced leveraging failure. Just humans, raw and vulnerable, admitting we had absolutely no idea what we were doing, but were somehow, stubbornly, doing it anyway. We were all in the same compost heap, and we were figuring out how to grow. I learned to celebrate entirely different victories. The day I could talk about my defunct business without my voice shaking, without the shame overwhelming me. The first time someone hired me, not despite my failure, but explicitly because of what I'd learned from it, the hard-won wisdom I now possessed. The moment, quiet and profound, when I realized I trusted myself again, not to never fail, because that was an impossible fantasy, but to survive when I inevitably did. To know, deep in my bones, that I had the capacity to withstand the storm. My climb, you shared, looked like learning to live in a world that continued, relentlessly, without your daughter. Some days, that felt like an unbearable betrayal of her memory. Most days, it just felt utterly impossible, a cruel cosmic joke. Time, that supposed healer, became this cruel, paradoxical magician, making you forget the exact shade of her eyes, the specific cadence of her voice, while simultaneously making the ache of missing her more precise, more sharply defined, more agonizingly real. You developed these rituals, these small, sacred acts of remembrance. Lighting a candle at precisely 7:23 p.m., the exact time she was born, a silent tribute to her brief, brilliant life. Making her favorite peanut butter and honey sandwiches, leaving them on the counter until they got stale, a poignant offering to a ghost. Keeping her voice recordings, those precious snippets of her laughter and chatter, but being too terrified, too fragile, to actually listen to them. These small, almost desperate acts of remembrance felt like breathing exercises for your soul, a way to keep her essence alive, however painfully. The hardest part, you confessed, was learning that healing wasn't linear. It wasn't a steady upward curve. You'd have weeks, sometimes even months, where you felt almost functional, almost normal, only to be blindsided by a wave of grief so fresh, so potent. It felt exactly like the first day. You remembered being at the grocery store again, that familiar, mundane setting, seeing a little girl in a yellow dress, and having to abandon your cart right there in the cereal aisle because you couldn't stop shaking, the memories flooding back with an intensity that stole your breath. But here's what nobody tells you about profound, earth-shattering loss. It doesn't just break you. It fundamentally rewires your capacity for joy. The first time you genuinely laughed, like ugly, snorting, can't breathe laughter, the kind that makes your stomach hurt, you felt an immediate, sharp pang of guilt, like you were betraying her, somehow. Then, a different thought, a revolutionary insight, dawned on you. That laugh, that pure, unadulterated moment of joy, contained her. She would have been 6 by then, probably rolling her eyes at her mom's ridiculous, unrestrained laugh, delighting in your happiness. That moment of joy wasn't replacing her. It was carrying her forward, a vibrant, living part of you. It was her legacy, expressed through your capacity to feel. You started volunteering at the Children's Hospital, not because you were over it, a concept you now knew was a myth, but because you finally understood some pain doesn't get better. It doesn't disappear. It just gets different. And sometimes, the most healing, most profound thing you can do is simply sit with someone else's pain, truly be present, without trying to fix it, without offering empty platitudes. You'd hold babies while their moms gratefully showered, snatching a moment of peace. You'd read to kids while their parents cried, quietly, desperately, in the hallway. You'd whisper the words you wished someone had told you in your darkest hours. This is unbearable, absolutely unbearable. And you, my dear, you are bearing it. You are becoming a lighthouse in the storm for others. Section 4. The discovery of beauty. The beauty, when it finally arrived, didn't come as a sudden, dramatic lightning bolt, illuminating everything in a flash. No, it leaked in slowly, subtly, like light filtering under a closed door. One day, I realized I was genuinely excited about a project. Embarrassingly, almost giddily excited. It was this tiny consulting gig, helping another failed business owner navigate the bewildering, humiliating process of bankruptcy. Not world-changing stuff, not the kind of grand ambition I once chased. But I caught myself smiling while working, a genuine, unforced smile, and it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like possibility. That's when I finally understood beauty after devastation isn't about finding some neat, tidy good in the bad. It's not about pretending the pain wasn't real or necessary. It's about recognizing that the bad, the absolutely awful, doesn't cancel out your capacity for good, for joy, for creation. They exist on parallel tracks. You can, impossibly, walk both simultaneously. Some days, you stumble headfirst into the crushing darkness. Other days, you stumble, almost accidentally, into the unexpected light. Both are real. Both are valid. Both are undeniably, irrevocably yours. I started noticing things I'd been far too busy, too consumed by my own ambition and despair to ever see before. How my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, always saves the comic section of the newspaper for me, carefully folded, because she remembers I love the crossword puzzle. The way the barista at my local coffee shop remembers my ridiculously complicated order but still asks, with a mischievous twinkle in her eye, the usual, like it's a choice I just made, a fresh decision. These tiny, almost invisible kindnesses felt like the universe, in its own subtle way, saying, "Hey, I see you too. You're not alone." They were small, quiet affirmations of connection. The real revelation, the true breakthrough, came when I stopped trying to force my pain into a neat, marketable package of purpose. That felt like another performance, another exhausting attempt to control the uncontrollable, to make sense of the senseless. Instead, I just started being honest. Brutally, refreshingly honest. When people asked, with varying degrees of sincerity, "How are you doing?" I'd say, some days I cry in my car. Other days I actually forget to cry. Both feel like progress, honestly. And you'd be absolutely amazed how many people, often strangers, would respond with a quiet, knowing, "Me too." That shared vulnerability, that unspoken understanding, was its own kind of beautiful. My business now isn't what I lost. It's smaller, yes. Weirder, absolutely. More human, undeniably. I still help people navigate professional failure, but we always start with the personal, because you simply can't separate them. I work with former executives who've forgotten how to make their own coffee, let alone manage their own emotions. With entrepreneurs who've so deeply tied their self-worth to their net worth that when the latter disappears, they feel like nothing. With people who, like me, define themselves by what they could relentlessly build instead of who they could authentically be. The beauty, I've come to realize, is in the rebuilding itself. Not the glorious before, not the triumphant after, but the messy, uncertain, utterly human during. The imperfect, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back process of becoming someone you never, ever planned to be. I have a client who, after a devastating divorce, sends me photos of her first homemade birthday cake. Lopsided, far too much frosting, but absolutely, perfectly radiant with pride. Another texts me every single time he cooks a meal that isn't takeout, a small victory against the inertia of despair. These aren't recovery milestones in the traditional sense. They're reclamation acts. Tiny, defiant declarations that scream, I still get to choose joy. I still get to create, even here, in the rubble. Your discovery, you told me, came through the profound act of helping other grieving parents. Not because you had answers, because you knew there were no easy answers, but because you finally, truly understood the question. We think we want to know why. Why our children? Why us? Why now? But the real question, the one that truly keeps us up at night, the one that haunts our waking moments, is how. How do we keep living, keep breathing, keep existing in a world that contains both infinite, boundless love and infinite, crushing loss? The answer, you found, isn't satisfying in the way we crave. It's not a formula, not a quick fix. You just do. You breathe when it feels physically impossible, when your lungs protest. You eat when food tastes like ash, like sawdust. You sleep when your dreams are haunted, when the silence of the night is deafening. And slowly, impossibly, incrementally, you begin to notice that the ash taste is fading, just a little. That you laughed, genuinely, without even realizing it. That you're making plans for next month, for next year, instead of just desperately surviving today. I've learned that beauty in grief isn't about finding some grand, cosmic meaning in the loss itself. It's about recognizing, with startling clarity, that love doesn't die with the body. My daughter's love is still here, a palpable force, shaping how I move through the world, influencing every decision. When I hold another mother's trembling hand while she cries, that's her love, expressed through my empathy. When I remember to be patient with strangers, to offer a kind word, that's her teaching, her gentle influence. When I see joy and, despite the lingering guilt, dare to reach for it, to embrace it, that's her legacy, living vibrantly through me. It's a profound, enduring connection. Section 5, the new normal. My new normal looks absolutely nothing like my old life, and you know what? That's more than okay. It's liberating. I wake up most mornings without the crushing weight of pretending to have it all together, of wearing a mask of effortless success. Some mornings, I tackle the day with a renewed vigor, feeling like I'm making up for lost time, seizing every opportunity. Others, honestly, I count it a monumental win if I simply remember to eat lunch, if I manage to respond to a few emails. Both are valid. Both are progress. Both are deeply human. I still have moments, fleeting and sharp, where I miss my former life. The deceptive simplicity of believing that hard work guaranteed success, that effort always equaled reward. But I wouldn't trade this version of me, this scarred, resilient, wiser version, for that naive innocence. This me knows, deep in her bones, that failure isn't fatal, that asking for help, truly reaching out, is not a weakness but a profound act of strength. That rebuilding, brick by painful brick, is an act of rebellion against a culture that relentlessly demands constant, unwavering achievement. My relationships are deeper now, richer, more authentic. I simply don't have time or energy for surface-level connections, not when I've seen how quickly everything, absolutely everything, can disappear. My friendships are built on foundations of, I see your mess, I acknowledge your imperfections, and I'm still here. We swap stories of ridiculously small victories and utterly public failures. There's no pretense, no performance in these circles. We've all been through the compost heap, and we're all, together, learning how to bloom in that rich, fertile, sometimes stinking, fertilizer. The business is different too. Smaller, yes, intentionally so, but far more aligned with who I'm genuinely becoming, rather than who I was desperately trying to prove I was. I still consult, but now, crucially, I also create safe spaces for others to admit they truly don't know what they're doing. We meet in bustling coffee shops and collaborative co-working spaces, these vibrant islands of figuring it out together. No one wears suits. Everyone's honest about their terror, their vulnerability. And it's, ironically, the most successful I've ever been at something that can't be measured in quarterly reports or profit margins. It's measured in connection, in shared humanity. I've learned to measure success differently, radically differently. Not by quarterly growth figures or impressive investor decks, but by how quickly I can honestly say, I need help, when I'm drowning, when the old familiar darkness threatens to overwhelm. By how often I consciously choose rest over the relentless, self-destructive hustle. By how many times I choose raw honesty over maintaining a perfect, curated image. These aren't Instagram-worthy metrics, no. They're quiet, intensely personal victories that feel like taking a deep, life-affirming breath after holding it for years. My new normal, you've shared, is learning to parent a child who isn't physically here. It's a paradox, a constant ache, a profound act of love. You still celebrate her birthday with her favorite cake, even when it makes guests uncomfortable, even when their well-meaning glances feel like daggers. You talk about her in the present tense, because love, true love, doesn't have a past tense. You've become this strange, unexpected grief ambassador, gently teaching people that they can, that they should, mention her name without worrying they'll remind you of your loss. You never forgot her, not for a single second. You've learned that healing isn't a final destination, a place you arrive at, and then everything is suddenly fine. It's a complex, intricate dance. Some days, you lead with joy, light on your feet, almost buoyant. Other days, grief cuts in, heavy and relentless, forcing you into a slower, more somber rhythm. The music of life changes, but you keep moving, keep dancing. You've stopped waiting for the magical day when it won't hurt anymore, because you know, with a heartbreaking certainty, that day doesn't exist. Instead, you wait for the day when hurting doesn't mean stopping, when you can carry the immense weight of your loss and still dance, still laugh, still love the people who are here, vibrantly alive, without feeling like you're abandoning the one who isn't. It's a profound, ongoing act of integration. Section 6. Shared meaning. We met in the aftermath, didn't we? You and I. Two people absolutely convinced we'd never feel whole again, never truly mend. What we've learned, painfully and beautifully, is that wholeness looks profoundly different after devastation. It's not about returning to the person you were before the storm, because that person is gone. It's about integrating who you've become with who you still can be, forging a new, stronger self from the fragments. It's like kintsugi, the exquisite Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer. The cracks don't disappear. They become the most beautiful, most valuable, most profound part of the piece. They tell a story. We've learned that resilience isn't some superhero ability to bounce back to your original state unscathed. It's about bouncing forward, taking those broken pieces, those shattered fragments, and meticulously, lovingly building something entirely new, something that never existed before. My business failure, your immeasurable loss. We thought they were definitive endings, but they were, in truth, brutal, undeniable invitations to begin again, to start anew, but differently this time. With more wisdom, more empathy, more fierce determination. And the most surprising discovery of all, we're not special, not in this regard. Everyone, absolutely everyone, gets invited to this particular, unwelcome party eventually. The one where life as you know it, the life you meticulously constructed, abruptly ends. The invitation itself isn't the tragedy. It's the universal human experience, the shared thread that connects us all. What we choose to build from the rubble, the choices we make in the face of utter destruction, that's where our true power lives. That's where our agency lies. We've learned to stop saying, with a knowing nod, everything happens for a reason. Instead, we say something far more empowering. What happens can become reason. The reason, the meaning, isn't inherent in the tragedy itself, because often there is no discernible reason for suffering. It's in what we consciously, deliberately choose to do with the aftermath. How we let it soften us toward others' pain, making us more compassionate, more understanding. How we let it teach us what truly, profoundly matters in this fleeting existence. How we let it make us more human, more connected, not less. It's an active choice, a continuous act of creation. So, if you're reading this, and you find yourself in your own suffocating darkness right now, please don't rush to desperately find the light. Just sit there. Allow yourself to feel it all: the anger, the sorrow, the fear, the utter exhaustion. Then, when you're ready, when a tiny flicker of energy returns, get fiercely curious. Curious about what kind of light, what kind of life might be possible in this new, unfamiliar landscape that has emerged from the wreckage. Share your story below, not as some performative inspiration porn, but as a genuine lighthouse, a beacon of shared experience for others navigating similar, treacherous storms. And if someone comes to mind, someone who needs to hear that broken can, in fact, be profoundly beautiful, then tag them. Let them know they're not alone. The truth we both, through our separate trials, discovered is that life's beauty isn't hiding from the hard moments. It doesn't shy away from the ugliness or the pain. Instead, it grows through them, like stubborn, resilient grass pushing its way through solid concrete. Not despite the cracks, but precisely because of them. My business failure didn't just teach me about cash flow or market trends. It taught me about flow itself, how life keeps moving, relentlessly, sometimes carrying us through rapids that feel utterly fatal, but are, in truth, just forging a new, unexpected path. Your daughter's death didn't just teach you about loss, about the gaping void left behind. It taught you about the astonishing persistence of love, how it fiercely refuses to die, even when bodies fail, even when lives are tragically cut short. How it transforms us into people capable of holding others' pain without trying to fix it, without offering empty solutions. How it makes us keep choosing life, keep choosing connection, even when death has taken what we valued most, what we held most dear. We don't promise that the pain ends. That would be a cruel lie. We promise that it changes shape, from sharp and immediate, a constant, searing wound, to dull and aching, a familiar throb, to something that eventually lives beside you, a quiet companion, rather than consuming you entirely. The beauty isn't in the suffering itself. It's in who you become while surviving it. More compassionate, more honest, more fiercely, vibrantly alive to both profound joy and lingering sorrow. If you're reading this from your own hardest moment, know this, deep in your soul. You don't have to feel strong to be strong. You don't have to feel hopeful to keep going. You just have to keep going. One breath, one shower, one honest answer to "how are you?" at a time. The beauty isn't waiting at some distant finish line. It's in the crawling, in the choosing, in the stubborn, defiant refusal to let your worst moment, your deepest pain, define your final, magnificent chapter. We've learned that life's beauty isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a decision. 1,000 tiny decisions made every single day to keep noticing, to keep feeling, to keep choosing connection over isolation, truth over performance, presence over perfection. Some days, you'll make those decisions with grace and ease. Other days, you simply won't, and that's perfectly okay. Both are human. Both are part of the journey. The garden grows in the compost. The light shines most brightly through the cracks. The beauty emerges not despite our hardest moments, but precisely because of how we choose to carry them forward. Not as crushing burdens that weigh us down, but as ballast, steadying us in the choppy waters. Not as definitive endings, but as profound, sacred invitations to begin again, differently, more human, more whole, more beautifully broken than we ever imagined possible. Subscribe if you want more honest conversations about navigating life's impossible moments with unwavering honesty and genuine hope. No toxic positivity, just real people figuring it out together, one hard one step at a time.